Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Phil Marriott. Now it's another movie review today, this time something from 1990. Sean Vickers, did you get your ass to Mars?
1990, I can barely even remember it. I was there though. I was there in 1990. I was, I don't know what you call it in today's money, a tween. It's one of those films that used to always appear as like the Christmas special. So like, you know, like when there was just 4 channels, and then like about this time of year, they would like reveal their listings of all the films that are going to be out for Christmas. And Total Recall, that we're going to talk about today, was always one of those like, oh my God, we're going to see Total Recall. It was so massive.
I was always the type of person that never wanted to see a film if everybody else was raving about it. And this was one of those films that everybody was talking about. And I must admit, science fiction, really, for me, it's not really my bag usually.
Ah, interesting. Well, it is actually, that's where we differ, because I know that you love a bit of horror.
Yeah.
I do love a good bit of science fiction. Good, and I stress good.
If we're talking about horror stroke sci-fi, like The Thing or Alien, I'm definitely there. But just sci-fi on its own, it's like Doctor Who. I've never got it.
Aliens, Prometheus, I can get into because I really love what Ridley Scott tried to do with all that kind of stuff, and love it if it's good. And there is so much bad sci-fi that's made, like any genre. There's so much bad that but that's my jam. But what I would say about sci-fi is, if it's done well, it can challenge topics that other genres can't do, which might sound like the textbook sci-fi, but that's what I think, which is often when I've seen amazing things. Like, I loved Arrival because I thought it did something that another genre couldn't do, that kind of otherworldliness of sci-fi that allows you to do things quite clever. But generally, most of them don't do that, and it's absolute BS. But yeah, there's some good stuff like that.
So we've already covered one of the other movies from this director. Paul Verhoeven is the director. We covered Showgirls in our first episode of Flick Flop with very special guest Gail Porter. If you haven't seen that web series, you need to check it out. The playlist is linked above. No excuse for not checking those out. We've done 3 films already.
Check it out. It's real. And it is interesting that we are talking about Paul Verhoeven again, because he was really an it director at one point. He did this film, obviously Total Recall, he did Showgirls, he did RoboCop, he did
Starship Troopers.
Like, he did Basic Instinct. Like, he was like that director. And I think what's quite interesting, and we can talk about this, there was a point where he had this moment in the sun. I mean, they're all kind of classics in a way, and for many different reasons. What you kind of got, I think, was then the next wave of directors, which was James... Who's the guy that did Titanic?
Oh, James Cameron.
They had James Cameron come along, and then you had, like, the Terminators, and you had, like... And the vibe changed, because obviously it also went into, like, a CGI... That's what, like... Terminator's like the start. Terminator 2 is like the start of that CGI story that we've lived through now for the rest of eternity. And in an interesting way, Total Recall was on the cusp of that, where it was still live action. And it's quite genius for that in a way.
The visual effects in this are groundbreaking. I mean, they're absolutely phenomenal, so good. But it is a real mixture, isn't it? Because like you say, it's live action, but they use a lot of CGI. And the CGI for its time, 1990, is pretty good when you think about it. I mean, looking at this new remastered, restored version, because it's out for the 30th anniversary, it looks incredible even now. It's like a lot of films back then wouldn't have stood the test of time.
And so they won an Academy Award for special effects. This film won an Academy Award, and Rob Bottin, who was the guy that led it, did a whole bunch of films where he specialised in it. And I think as I said to him, I think he's right on the cusp of like what used to be live action effects into CGI. And he did all sorts. I made a list because my brain is, as you know, Phil. But he did The Thing, he did Tim Curry's Demon in Legend, he did the serial killing horrors in Seven.
And you can really see that as well in this film. And also, you can also see, because it's been co-written by Gary Goldman, who worked on Big Trouble in Little China, obviously another John Carpenter film. And
love it!
You can really see that in this as well. It's got those elements. It's got that feel, isn't it? But it's completely nuts. I mean, do you want to set the scene? Do you want to tell the story?
Yeah, I'll have a go. So it follows the life of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and we'll talk about whether he's miscast or not, as the character Douglas Quaid. And he's just like this kind of like run-of-the-mill guy living his fantasy, and he goes to this centre called Recall to try and have some memories kind of inserted. And then what happens really is he becomes this device for espionage, and it all kind of goes quite bonkers. It's all set on Mars. It really tells the story of him trying to live out a fantasy, and through that, dark forces being at play and him becoming a pawn in a bigger story. He is also this like totally 80s action man. Like he was the 80s action man. Sylvester Stallone, he'd done a bit with Rocky and with Rambo. Arnold had really positioned himself, like with Conan, with Terminator, and all sorts. He was like the muscle man. So then he's cast into this role where he's just this like guy pottering around, gets something inserted into his head. And I think the interesting thing about it is, whilst initially I was like, he's miscast. In a normal film, the fact that he's this big muscle guy and he can beat everyone because he's the strongest person is the interesting thing. But in this film, the villain is in his head. And so it doesn't matter whether he's the puniest guy in the world or whether he's this big muscle guy, the villain's actually in his head. And I think that's quite clever.
I really loved it, and I think it was perfectly cast because there's a really early scene where he's drilling on the construction site and he's there with his muscles bulging and kind of putting the other guy to shame, but it's almost like the focus is on him and he's got such a great body. I mean, he shows his body off quite a bit in this movie, but I love that because Paul Verhoeven's got this, this history of kind of being misogynist, because a lot of people do think he is, but I don't personally think he has been. But although, it's a very controversial topic, isn't it? Because he has displayed women in his movies, I don't know, just treating women like they're objects. But then I think these women do often have a lot of power as well. So that's quite interesting because it does show him with his clothes off. Not all of his clothes off, obviously.
It does, and it's interesting you say that because we have talked about the angles of misogyny through the lens of Showgirls. There was an interesting bit where Arnold is describing his perfect woman, which does get a bit icky.
Yeah.
So basically, he's creating Sharon Stone. Yeah. But and he's describing the kind of woman that he wants. And it is a bit cringe. And those moments, I think, just wouldn't land in a film, in a movie that's made today. But that's also a bit like when you watch Weird Science, movies like that, which have the same kind of really weird, dark undertone. About how people perceive women.
It's interesting you say that because at the beginning of the Blu-ray there is a message that pops up on the screen saying the historical attitudes are not necessarily good today. They might be deemed as offensive. That certain people might think they're outdated. So I think that's quite interesting because 30 years down the line, my God, you really see that, don't you? You really see how dated it is in some ways.
Did you know it's based on the Philip K. Dick book?
I only found that out today. I didn't know before, but this is the first time I've seen it, so I don't really know much about the film at all until watching it. But I didn't. I
always think it's amazing about Philip K. Dick because I do think he is the originator of a lot of content in sci-fi.
Was it loosely based?
Loosely based, yeah. Frames so many. As I say, there's things in sci-fi where you frame a bigger conversation. And I do think Philip K. Dick is responsible for a lot of that. He has some incredible content, so it doesn't surprise me. Again, I will look at my screen because I can't remember anything, as you know, Phil. It's based on We Can Remember It For You Wholesale.
Did you spot the obsession with nails again? Because we talked about this in Showgirls where Gina Gershon is wanting her nails painted. And there is kind of like nails all the way through Showgirls. It's like this kind of weird, trippy obsession thing. But
maybe you've got a fetish.
Well, I think there must be, because there's a scene with the secretary where Arnie's character works, and she's painting her nails with like this weird computer device thing. It's like an app that changes her nails and changes the colour on her nails.
I think you're right. It has got a bit of a nail fetish.
Yeah,
it occurs too much.
Maybe you're right. Maybe that's the whole kind of glamour beauty thing coming through that in his eyes. Maybe he wants to put that across in some way, almost like a caricature in a way.
True, very true. But that's why I think similar when Arnie's describing Sharon Stone, that's like a caricature really, because his tropes are so clunky and so obvious. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of that comes through. I'm surprised but not shocked when they put a disclaimer on the Blu-ray. I can imagine a generation we grew up with that, and we can see that it's problematic. So yeah, I can see why they would do that.
But I suppose a lot of the characters are caricatures in a way, and I suppose that does also bleed into other films that Paul Verhoeven's done, especially Showgirls, because that is very over the top. And it's a very nuts film, isn't it?
Well, you know my view on it, that he's the ultimate satirist, and therefore it's an allegory of Las Vegas.
Yes.
So I think it's incredibly clever. Yeah, I loved it. Anyway, Total Recall, I think it's an absolute gem. And really, I hope that they play it every Christmas until the end of eternity.
Yeah, I can't believe it's taken me so long to see it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a real roller coaster ride. It didn't ever bore me. I mean, it's 2 hours. I mean, some people might find that a bit heavy going. It's just over 2 hours, I think. But I think it needed to be. I don't think there's anything you could trim from that apart from obviously the stuff that offends.
It's also high camp.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Really, I don't think it's deliberately camp, but it is really camp.
Oh, do you not? See, I think it is. Look, just like Showgirls, I thought that was deliberately high camp. But then I guess that was set in Las Vegas, so it was meant to be.
High camp Mars colony. Sign me up.
Did you know how much this costs to make? It costs between $50 and $60 million.
I do know this as a fact.
In some ways, that's quite obscene.
It's the most expensive movie ever.
I know. I guess that's just, again, that's another reflection of the style of the movie, because the content is quite vulgar in some ways.
But that reflects, I think, the power that Verhoeven had, where he could bank. I mean, I think Showgirls was also. I think we talked about Showgirls. I think it was 50 million, I think, or something, 40 million to make Showgirls. There's big numbers in the 90s, and then as we talked about, you go into the likes of Terminator 2, which suddenly went to the 3 digits, like you're in the 100 millions, and suddenly you're like, oh my god, this is ridiculous. And then that kind of set the benchmark for where films were. But yeah, 1990, 60 million on a movie is a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely. Is this the sort of film we need to concentrate on the acting? Because I think the cast here should win awards for keeping a straight face in a lot of these scenes.
Yeah, fair. I don't watch Total Recall for the acting film.
Arnie does do some amazing facial expressions, though. I mean, it's proper gurning, isn't it?
So happy that I can't deal with it, which is why I think in some ways he comes across as being miscast, but I think that's also really clever by Verhoeven. But I don't know, it's a ham sandwich, and I know you're a vegan, so that's going to be doubly effective.
Corn ham sandwich.
Yeah. Ham sandwich, it's just hammy.
So unsurprisingly, it did make a lot of money. I think it has grossed way over, was it 4 times or something? Might be wrong, actually. It might be a lot more than that. But obviously it cost between 50 and 60 million. But yeah, it was very popular. It went straight to #1, I think, on the week of release at the box office.
Brilliant.
Did you know about the 2012? There was a 2012 version of the film with Colin Farrell.
I don't know about. Oh yeah, I think I do know about that. But that again, in a way, don't touch Total Recall. I say it's about so many films.
Yeah.
I talk about this with Gail the other week on Flick Flop. There's certain films, just don't touch it. Don't touch Total Recall. If you try and polish Total Recall, you lose the magic of Total Recall. Because of the way it's put together, the time we put together, the acting, it's just don't touch it. Just don't touch it.
Yeah, because this movie had Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad in it.
Do you know what? I have seen it.
Oh, you have?
The dark depth of my mind. I've actually blocked it out. I do recall seeing it. Yeah, it didn't need to be made. That's going to leave that there.
Can we also talk about the violence in this as well? Because it was actually certificated, I think it was an X rating. I think it was the last film to be called, or to be given an X rating. Excessive violence. I mean, it's comic book violence though, isn't it? I mean, I see the difference between something like maybe a horror film with really gruesome graphic gore. This you kind of expect it not to be real. You know, in your brain, you're not seeing it as real violence.
It's not the takeaway that I get, because the takeaway that I get from Total Recall is like that amazing thing where his head segments like.
Such a great scene, isn't it?
But the world had never seen it before. So when I think about Total Recall, I don't think about the violence. I actually think about some of these bonkers things that stay with me for a film that was made 30 years ago. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just I'm hardened or I'm normalised to it. I don't know.
Also, 30 years on, I guess, you know, we've seen more graphic violence. But you're right. I mean, that scene where the woman goes through Mars immigration, I mean, that scene is just fantastic. I mean, even now, it still looks great. So well done. So it's a big thumbs up for Total Recall.
I can't give it anything other than a thumbs up, because it's like, it underpins my childhood, it underpins, terrestrial TV. It's
memories for a lot of people, especially people that have grown up that were children back. I mean, it's not a kid's movie by any means, but I suppose in some ways it is, because it is like comic book sci-fi. But it is that element as well that makes you treasure a film even more 30 years on, isn't it?
for me, it's untouchable. There's a whole bunch of films that sit in this category, which on reflection, if you looked at them independently, they are a load of crap. But they are part of my childhood, and therefore they are in an untouchable bracket. And I can see all the flaws, and I can see all the issues, and I can see all the errors, but they will always have a place in my heart, and Total Recall sits in that bracket.
So Total Recall has been specially restored for a 30th anniversary Blu-ray and DVD as well. I think it's out on 4K too. Check the links below for your copy if you want to buy a copy, and don't forget to check out the Flick Flop playlist with our very special guest, Gail Porter, who is really part of the furniture now. She's not really a special guest anymore. She's very special, but not so much a guest.
She's like, is she a guest? Is she a permanent special guest?
She's part of the furniture.
She's the host. You get all of Gail. It's brilliant. It's unvarnished Gail. It's brilliant. Exactly what you want.
And we have to dress up for the next one, which is Catwoman.
Catwoman. Oh, I can't wait to talk about Catwoman.
Yeah, I've not seen it yet. I need to get on it. I need to do my homework.
I don't want to say anything.
Thank you for watching, everyone. Good to see you, Sean.